Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon and welcome to Who Needs a University Anymore? Education and the Future of Learning. Thank you for being here with us, and if everybody could settle down, we will start. We find ourselves living through multiple overlapping shifts: rapid technological change, stagnating job markets, and a climate crisis that is reshaping how and where people live and work. At the same time, much of the world, especially South Asia and Africa, is remarkably young, with the median age being around 20 years old. We're talking about over 1 billion people asking very practical questions. Where will we study? What should we learn? And what kind of future are we being prepared for? Universities have traditionally answered these questions by shaping ideas, building communities, and enabling social mobility. Today, that role is being re-examined, and that's the context for the conversation we're about to have. I'm Khadija Amir, and I will be your moderator. I work with the Punjab group. I sit on the board of several private chartered universities and Dunya Foundation. Previously, I've been a teacher at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I'm also co-founder of Indus Conclave and publishing editor of Dunya Digital. I work with young people, and my work sits at the intersection of education and institutions and public promise. So this topic of where universities are going and what the future looks like for universities is incredibly important to me. We're very fortunate to have a panel that brings together global, institutional, and policy perspectives paired with on-the-ground expertise. Let me briefly introduce our speakers. I'll start with Dr. Zainab Badawi, who is the president of SOAS University of London. Dr. Badawi has spent much of her career engaging with policymakers, scholars, and institutions across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. She brings a deeply global perspective on the role of university, but also talks about how... Yeah, go ahead. Yes, please give her a round of applause. Dr. Badawi's work also talks about how universities shape public debate, leadership, and how societies understand themselves in a changing world. We're really pleased to have her. We also have Dr. Sohail Naqvi, who has previously served as Executive Director of Pakistan's Higher Education Commission. He's also been Vice Chancellor of LUMS and Director of University of Central Asia. So he brings a really good mix of local and Central Asian perspectives. But what makes his perspective particularly valuable is that he's worked across the full spectrum, from higher education policy and regulation to university leadership. And now through his work with knowledge streams, it focuses on skills-based and industry-linked education. He's seen firsthand how the education... Yes, please, go ahead. He's seen firsthand how the educational landscape is shifting and what that means for universities going forward. Dr. Akbar Zaidi is the Executive Director of IBA Karachi and one of Pakistan's leading scholars on political economy and development. His work looks closely at institutions, labor markets, and inequality. And he brings an important perspective on the role of universities and what they play in social mobility and economic opportunity, especially in a country like Pakistan. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that, sir. And finally, Dr. Adil Malik is an Associate Professor of Development Economics at the University of Oxford and a Global Fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. He's also co-founder and academic lead of the Oxford Pakistan program, which supports Pakistani students pursuing graduate studies at Oxford. His work focuses on institutions, political economy, and the broader civic role universities play in shaping societies. So with such a range, yes. With such a range of perspectives on the panel, I'd like to start by zooming out and asking a broader question about where universities actually stand in this moment of change. So I'm going to start with Dr. Badavi. Dr. Badavi, from your vantage point, leading a global university, what do you see as the most serious pressure facing universities today, with rising costs, visa restrictions, and AI reshaping access to knowledge? How should the universities rethink their value proposition, especially for students from the global south?
Thank you very much indeed, Khadija, and hello to my fellow panelists, and good morning, good afternoon rather, to all of you. It's terrific to be with you all at this Think Fest. So I don't make my first answer too long. I will just set out what I believe are the challenges meeting universities globally at the moment, but particularly in the UK where I live. I think statistics are quite important, and so when you say who needs a university, I think it's worth remembering that actually globally 35% of young people go to universities. In some parts of the world like Africa, it's as low as 6%. So clearly a lot of people are not going to universities. When you go to North America, Europe and so on, the figure is much higher, it's more like 68%. So that's the first point to make. A lot of people don't actually have access to university education. But I do think that universities are facing, in some cases, an existential crisis, because one very startling statistic that I saw a few days ago from the US Bureau for Labor Statistics, they said that by 2030, they estimate that about 60% of jobs will typically not require a university degree. And so that's quite alarming. People will think, well, is it worth it? Because the future of jobs is obviously not going to require a degree. We also know from various studies that there's a greater emphasis now on blue-collar workers, you know, people working as plumbers, as heating engineers and so on, and these don't require degrees, jobs which are more resistant to AI. So again, that's going to put a lot of pressure on universities. Universities, of course, offer a whole array of subjects, the arts, humanities, social sciences, as well as the STEM subjects. We see, particularly in the UK and other parts of the world, that these so-called soft subjects are under pressure because a lot of governments, you know, have got their industrial strategy. They want to focus on subjects which they think will boost economic growth, and so they favour research and study in the STEM subjects, not so much in, you know, philosophy or history and so on. And so that means that a lot of universities are going to feel the pressure because they've got, you know, academics, they've got departments which are very much focused on the arts and humanities, and so that's going to force some universities perhaps to go out of business or to amalgamate. And so when you see that governments like the one in the UK, which has just in the past few days published its strategy for further education, saying we are going to focus on subjects like quantum computing, biotech innovation, and put our money there, I think it is quite worrying for universities for the reasons I outlined. But also I think that, you know, there is concern in academic circles that that may mean that you take your eye off areas which you don't know about in the future, which may actually be the new areas of research that we need. So I think that there's a real challenge in the world of AI, and I think universities really have got to get their act together, and perhaps we can discuss, you know, how they can best do that.
Thank you. Because of your international experience, I'm wondering if you want to say anything about free speech, because over the last few years we've seen such turmoil, and I'm sure everybody's heard about it in the news, coming from universities abroad. We have Trump cutting funding for Ivy League universities. We know that universities in the UK are going through their own struggles. I'm wondering if you have anything to say about that while you're with us.
Well, I mean, yes, it's been a huge debate on campus, including at SOAS, which, because of the subject matter that we offer, you know, the School of Asian and African Studies, we do a lot of subjects to deal with the South, and so, you know, obviously the Gaza conflict and all the other humanitarian conflicts in the world. is something that resonates a great deal with our student body. I mean, we're part of the University of London, and so we are bound by the, you know, the rules, the strictures of the university itself. But I think there's been a lot of debate about, you know, what can be said on campus and speakers being cancelled and so on. I mean, in the UK, it tends to focus more around the transgender issue, actually. So I think that people are feeling their way, but by and large, I think that we have got a fairly good balance in the UK. I don't think we're going the way of the United States, where you know, academics are worried about speaking without the presence of a lawyer.
Thank you. I'm glad that's the case in the UK. Dr. Naqvi, you've worked across university leadership, regulation, and now skills-based education. Where do you think Pakistan's higher education system is most out of step with global trends? And what worries you most about how the system is currently structured?
Thank you. Well, what worries me most is money, because this higher education system or any education system is not going to be working without the appropriate amount of funding. And as a country, we seem to have forgotten our responsibility, constitutional, legal, moral, and everything else of supporting education. So that's one thing, but nevertheless, I see very, very exciting times as far as universities are concerned in Pakistan. Because we have the one thing that actually is the engine that drives universities, which is human talent. We have such an utter abundance of this talent that even if they close and don't give us visas anywhere else in the world, well, that talent will stay over here and it will deliver. And all these questions that we ask, you know, is AI is going to take over or something like that? I mean, AI is how old? You know, 15 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, if we talk about neural nets, etc. And what will happen 30 years from now? What the technologies that we have today, are they going to stay on forever? Is Google going to remain the big powerhouse? I mean, who are the Fortune 500 companies and what were they 50 years ago and what will happen 50 years later? That place where the future is defined is what the university is. And it has an integral role in society, in economic development, in civilization development, in our discourses, etc. So I feel that the country that is going to be investing in its universities and recognizing that its people are its greatest resource is the country that is going to progress in the world. And that has been the case in the past also.
Thank you, sir. So could we be a little bit more specific about where do you think it is that we require the most investment when it comes to universities in Pakistan, especially if we want to look at where global universities are going and we want to be able to match that?
Universities operate in the future. You create people for a world that has not arrived yet. So if you want to try and pick winners, well, that is something that that you can do. So you can create centers of AI or machine learning or do whatever it is. But you are actually focusing and investing on education and the nature of education, critical thinking. I mean, the core of morality, ethics, and the deep thinking, questioning person that you want to create. That part is not going to change. The subjects are going to be different. So what you want is an investment in the idea of higher education, of learning, of knowledge, dictating the future path or your destiny. And that realization is what you need and to be focusing on. I don't think that any particular subject is necessary. And as an example, I mean, today it is electronics, but at some point in time, the biological computers are going to take over. Because what you can do in what you are or what nature does in biology, We have no ability to recreate that. And now we have, all the quantum computing coming in. So it's ever changing. It is never static, and there is no such thing that we have arrived at the end of knowledge. And that's the thought process that you need to be investing in.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Zaidi, universities in Pakistan have expanded rapidly, but graduate unemployment remains high and economic mobility has slowed. How do you explain this gap between education and outcomes, and what does it tell us about the limits of higher education in an economy that isn't generating enough quality jobs?
I'm glad you didn't ask me if there's free speech in Pakistan, but
I wouldn't dare.
but I'll put that aside because I can't speak about free speech. I don't think universities are about jobs. Universities are about education, and exactly what Suhail said. If you have a good university, you don't have to worry about your students finding jobs. I have not met a LUMS graduate or an IBA graduate who is unemployed, or Habib University, the few universities, good quality universities that we have. Students from there, once they graduate, before they even graduate, they have jobs. We have 272 so-called universities in Pakistan. 167 of them are in the public sector, and the rest 105 are in the private sector. I think other than 10 of them, they should all close down. They do not offer education, they give degrees. And that's the problem with our HEC, and that's the problem with our higher education. That it is not giving an education like Suhail was talking about, where you talk about ideas, where you talk about creativity, where you talk about how you understand the world. And if you have a good university, you don't have to worry about getting a job, or students finding a job. They will find a job regardless. It's the quality of teachers, the quality of the institution, quality of the students, which determines whether they get a job or not. And I think that's where the future is. So what we need to do is, it's very popular to say that every district and every small town should have a university. Fine, you can do that, you can build a building, but you don't have teachers who can teach. So you have students going there because now you need something called a degree to get a job. But that degree is not good enough to give you any education. So you can sell degrees, but the problem is in Pakistan there are very few universities which are giving you education.
Thank you, sir. So I'm wondering, please go ahead. Please also welcome Dr. Uzma Qureshi, who's VC of Lahore College University for Women. Thank you for joining us. So if we could get back to your point, what do you think is another alternative? So we're saying there's not enough good quality education. What is another alternative for the millions of young people that we have who are of university age? Do then they pivot towards skills-based education rather than a university degree?
So I'm not a great fan of skill-based education, I think, but given the fact that because our higher education system is failing and has already failed, I think there is a need. There used to be technical colleges in the 60s, 70s and 80s. They've all been closed down because they all upgraded to a university which doesn't offer education anymore. So I think perhaps there's a need to go back to a certain form of where you give skills to people with, after their intermediate, they can go and get some skills which will allow them to work in the modern economy or whatever part of the modern economy we are in. But I think it's also important, for example, something that I've been writing about and in conversation with other vice chancellors in Pakistan is that the HEC should get off our back. They should leave us alone. They should leave the good universities alone to do what they're doing. We know we are doing a very good job, and it's recognized by the quality of students, by the jobs that they get, and let HEC deal with, Higher Education Commission, deal with those universities which are struggling. We don't need their money, we don't get their money, we raise our own funds, and we do, and as do many other universities, and we are in the public sector. The IB is in the public sector, it's a public sector university. So there are models in the public sector which work very well as well. So I think if we have some sort of differentiation, let the Higher Education Commission, which sort of tells us that today we need to go and plant a tree in a certain part of the city, or today is so and so day and so and so day. They don't talk about education. They talk about, performance. They're very performative in so many ways. So I think if we could have a sense of an entity which leaves the best 25, 30, 40 universities in Pakistan to give education and deal with the others, I think that might address the problem of unemployment, of skills, and also of funding. It's something that Sohail spoke about. Give them the money, support those universities, not those who can manage on. Give more autonomy to universities. That's the problem with this bureaucratic structure that is under which we have higher education. It's not working.
Thank you, sir. Madam Usma, Lahore College University is a public university and they educate a large number of female students. I'd like to ask you if, can you talk about the specific constraints you face in terms of funding, infrastructure, class size, digital access, and how these affect the quality of education students receive?
Of course, it goes without saying that all of these things are very important and have a very good impact on overall education. But I'll take you back to what was being said earlier. Universities, if we really want to develop them into knowledge hubs where they create knowledge and preserve knowledge, and leave the skill part to community colleges and other such institutions who can focus on that, and let the universities be universities. And for that we need less interference. Universities need to be autonomous. If we want to have a better use of technology and the knowledge which has already been created, and we want to bring in people who have the academic acumen, if you like, if they want to contribute, we need to give them free space, including students. Students enter universities not to be regimented or used as commodities who can be filled in with certain knowledge and are demanded certain performance. They need to be given a free space where they can be free to think, free to innovate, and are surrounded by people who are not judgmental, or who don't feel that they are threatened because this new generation, which has so much exposure through technology, are somewhat misguided. They are, I think, very well guided. They have so much exposure and they know so much well about the field. They also know with new AI thing, new buzzword, but I think it's the intellect that we need to nurture in universities. We need to make them free thinkers, and we want to respect them as complete individuals who are able to make decisions, including women. Women are somewhat treated very differently from male counterparts. In women universities, it is expected that we are creating wives, we are creating future mothers, and we will never think of them as individuals who can make a difference. We are 51% of the world population. So unless we don't join the force, so to speak, if we don't contribute intellectually in the overall development of society, global society, we will be lagging behind. It is not that universities are not performing well. It is just that they are encaged by over policy and also over regularization. If they give us the autonomy, I think as a women university, we can lead and we can show them the real university that should be there for everyone to benefit from and get educated, not indoctrinated by a traditional way of thinking and looking at knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Usma, I would love to know how you encourage free thought in your students.
How do I encourage what?
Free thought.
Free
Thought.
thought, right. Some of my students are sitting here, so I can't lie or mislead again. I think my students will second me. They have a free space to think, and there are problems giving them access and respecting them as who they are. And they were not loaded on a bus to come and attend Think Fest. They were asked if they were interested. We promoted that here was an opportunity for them to interact with people who are the real thought leaders. And if they choose to be one of them, here is an opportunity to chisel out their own path of thinking. And that is the approach we have. However, saying that, it is not easy to bring a turnaround. It is sometimes, I always have this feeling that just when I got all the answers right, you've changed the questions. So it is an ongoing process. I talk a lot. I have a student council who are represented here. I have close interactions with them. And within my own domain, I request them to guide me, to help me create an environment which would be useful for them. And that is an ongoing process, and we have just taken baby steps. And I'm sure in the coming years, we'll be able to define what freedom is, what autonomy is, and how we can benefit from it.
Thank you. I think Dr. Badavi has a question for Dr. Uzma.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Dr. Uzma. Female education is very much the family business, because my great-grandfather was the pioneer of female education in the Sudan at the turn of the last century. So we run a women's university in the capital, although obviously now because of the war it's not going on. But what I wanted to ask you was, with the emphasis now on STEM subjects and quantum computing and biotech and all the rest of it, there is concern increasingly in the UK, Europe, North America and so on, that this is going to work against young women because they're not taken as seriously in these topics, and they have to, people doubt whether they understand all this science and technology. We know they do STEM, but they do medicine more than anything else. And people are worried about the knock-on effect, getting investment if they want to set up a company, whatever. Is that something that's on your radar that you're concerned about?
Yes, absolutely. We are focusing on STEAM. We don't ignore art. We can't ignore art at all. And I believe in interdisciplinary approach to things. We want to create intellectual freedom once again, I'm emphasizing. So STEM is very much on our agenda. We are improving and we are focusing and we are investing in these subjects. But at the same time, we are mindful of the fact that we are dealing with a society where women have to play a very significant role. So if STEM is not their choice, they may go in other directions, but if they choose to take a career in these fields, they should be fully supported. So when we create our linkages with industry, when we reach out to relevant people, we are very mindful of that. We give our students freedom that you don't need to feel pressured to join a certain field because that is one area which people think women should go into. If that's not your choice, you may not go there, but if it is your choice, we are here to support. And the university has created that, is in the process of creating that infrastructure where girls who want to go into STEM education, they have all the support and the connections and the network and those professional skills which will help them locate themselves well in those fields. I believe as an educationist that yes, women have not been treated very well when it comes to STEM, and it is the employers who need to understand that there are good female scientists who can help them develop their R&D and help them strengthen their industry. That is one negotiation which is on the table all the time, and that is the struggle that women have to take up, and we prepare our students that it is your hard work, your professionalism, and very, very strong network that you need to build up in your specific professional field. Only then you will be able to turn this around. Otherwise, if you're sitting there, there's something will come your way, from heavenly intervention, it won't happen. It is yourself, your inner woman, which will make other people see what your potential is in your chosen field, whether it is STEM or STEAM or any other intellectual endeavor, that is you who matters. You need to empower yourself first, then you can look anywhere else to make the right decision for yourself.
Thank you. Adil. The title of this panel is Who Needs a University Anymore? As we know, historically, universities were places for a small elite, and only in recent years have they been democratized. I'd like to ask you, given the rising costs, new technologies, and changing labor markets, do you think we may be moving back towards a world where full university education is once again primarily for those with time and resources? And if that's the case, what does it mean for social mobility, equality of opportunity, and the broader national role that universities are meant to play, particularly in countries like Pakistan?
Great. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be attending the Think Fest for the first time and to be part of this lovely panel. It's a long question, and the answer could sort of involve lots of different dimensions. But let me begin by saying that the university typically, the way we think about university is not just a place where you go and get a degree, you're taught by good teachers. It is much more than that. And particularly elite universities that you talked about are places where networks are produced. And if you ask me, after having taught at Oxford for 20 years, what's the best asset that Oxford would give, is not just what's taught in the classroom, it's really the peer group, the type of students you interact, the type of networks you form. That is a huge social capital, right? So if you've studied at Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, you go around the world, you'll find lots of people with similar degrees from the same places. And so it's a place where networks are produced. It's a place where there's a lot of agenda setting that is taking place. I mean, sometimes I feel in Oxford I'm more of a diplomat rather than an academic, because there's always a regular stream of visitors, thought leaders, people from the public life who are speaking, engaging with students, and the university people themselves play an important role in agenda setting. I think universities are also part of this growing system of gatekeeping. If you are authoring a paper from Oxford, Harvard, or MIT, and you're submitting it to a journal, you're much less likely to be desk rejected compared to, let's say, you're a scholar based in a developing country, or even in University of Leicester or Southampton, which are all very good universities. But there's huge entry barrier in that. So I think from that perspective, the universities would still be needed, because you are entering into a large, well-known university that is going to provide you a ticket for that. It's a club. So I think that is the sort of more practical side of looking at these elite universities. But there's another reason why you need a university, particularly these sort of universities, in the world of AI. Over the last year, I have seen the way Oxford has changed hugely in response to AI. I'm finding that these universities are also will be very good at adapting to new technologies. Within a year, every department has come up with its own policy on AI. You have a new pro-vice chancellor on digital education. So again, this is going to increase the gap. The good universities will be very good at adapting. They're going to be very resilient, which will further grow the divide. But we have to recognize that universities are part of society, right? And so many of the larger questions of society also apply to the university. People talk about free thinking. The classic question that we presented when it comes to university is that, is it a formative force or is it a dependent formation? Which is to say, a formative force would be someone where you produce enlightened individuals, people who can think critically, who can ask questions, who can engage respectfully with others, be part of that larger intellectual space. It's an important part of active citizenship. You cannot think of active citizenship without universities. You cannot think about a space to create a future without the university, because there is no vision for the future without hope. And there is no hope without a space in a society where people are able to think, reflect, and be in a state of transcendence, because it's almost like, We are all body and soul, right? And so we care for where we are, but we care for things that are transcendental, whether it comes to morality or religion or ethics. Universities are those spaces where you create hope. So you cannot create a vision for a society without a university that is really anchored in that. For many developing countries, we worry about sovereignty, and we will worry more about sovereignty in the face of what is happening in the world. There's no idea of sovereignty without a good university space. Some of the best universities in this region, whether it's Jamia Millia Islamia, Aligarh Muslim University, Government College, they were part of larger political movements. Muhammad Ali Johar, when he set up the university, it was a larger idealistic project that led to the creation of that university. So you need to create that space for self-directed education. That's why all societies, even before universities were born, much like Oxford was more like a, lots of these different religious madrasas of sorts, right? They were more educational institutions geared towards religion. Societies have always in history created spaces, whether it's monasteries or madrasas, where you pay people to think and say, you are not going to do the daily work, you're just going to think and engage and think about the larger questions of life. That will become even more important in the world of AI, because the AI wants to create us all as automated individuals, right? So the value on authenticity would actually increase as a result of that. So I think education gives us the pedagogy of hope. It gives us the pedagogy of the oppressed, right? Pedagogy of nationalism. So a university space has to be there, and it's connected with the larger question of what a society wants.
Thank you for that. I really like that. That universities are places for hope. And I mean, we can say that the creation of Pakistan, the idea of Pakistan can be credited to a university as well, and then it actually happened. So thank you for that. Dr. Badavi, coming back to you, how do you think universities can adapt in practical ways in what they teach, how they teach, and how they govern themselves, while still protecting their independence and intellectual purpose in an increasingly politicized environment?
So I don't know about the politicized environment, but I think that, you asked me at the beginning what the challenges were, and I set those out, but the name of this panel is Do We Need the Universities? And just to pick up on what Adil said, absolutely we do need universities in this polarized world, politicized world, the world of AI and technology, because if you speak to any Nobel Prize winning scientist or economist, they will tell you that their work, their breakthroughs benefited from collaboration, from talking, debate with other intellectuals in their field and so on. And that is why universities do provide the space for that collaboration, for debate. You're not just sitting there on your computer. And also the cross-disciplinary approach that you can derive from a university education, where you may be studying mathematics, but you'll be interacting with students who are studying the social sciences and history. The idea that we can be, an aeroplane flying on just one wing of STEM and AI and technology is not correct. You need the arts and humanities, the social sciences. How can you understand the world of AI if you don't understand ethics? So I think there's a real place for universities to nurture these kind of subjects and to say, look, stimulation, and as Adil said, it's about creating friendships and partnerships and networks in the future. Although as somebody who was an undergraduate at Oxford University many, many years ago, I do wonder now about the value of education from some of these elite institutions in Europe, because when I left Oxford, we all got jobs, just very quickly, but now I hear about students from Oxford who've got degrees in history or philosophy who are struggling to find jobs, actually, and somebody from a lesser university with a degree in engineering or in computer science is more likely to get a job, because these are the kind of jobs that the economy is demanding. So I am a little bit concerned about that direction of travel. But university education is very, very expensive, and you or somebody mentioned about, you know, whether it is just something that is going to be only afforded by a few people, and I think that's a real problem, because if you look at what's going on in the UK, where we have relied on in UK universities very much on the foreign students to boost our budgets, this is something which is now in retreat. The UK government has completely now, in the last few days, shifted its higher education strategy. In 2019, it set a target of 600,000 foreign students to come to the UK to study. But now in the UK, it's become part of the kind of debate on immigration. So the government is saying quite clearly, no, we don't want students to come in such great numbers to study in our British universities. We want British universities to set up branches in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and so that the students can benefit from a British education system, but out there. We do that already at SOAS. We've forged partnerships, you know, and set up linkages with universities in the global south. And actually, I don't think that's a particularly bad thing, because, you know, the challenges that we meet globally, we need voices from the south. We need that cross-fertilization of ideas. We need to know, you know, what the academics and intellectuals are thinking in the south. And so I think if there are greater linkages between universities in the global north and in the global south, that can only be really a good thing, because I think that you know, that's something that we all try to promote at SOAS. We're a university of the world. We want to include intellectuals, you know, across all disciplines and from other parts of the world, because I think there has been, certainly when I was an undergraduate at Oxford, I did my postgraduate studies at London University, there was very much an idea that, you know, all the thinking came from Western thought, really. I mean, we've tried to change that at SOAS now, where we try to indigenize our curriculum. So if you study about Pakistan, you'll hear about Pakistani historians' perspectives and intellectuals and so on, the same with Africa and so on. And I think that that is very, very important. So maybe what the UK is doing by encouraging linkages between our universities in the UK and in the global south will really, you know, develop that kind of thinking in universities. So I think that there are real challenges, but there are real, you know, there's real potential for change. But certainly we do need the universities for all the reasons that, you know, my fellow panelists have articulated.
Thank you. We do have time for audience questions. If anybody has a question, we can take about 3 or 4. I see somebody right in the middle next to the lady in yellow. Could you stand up, please? Yes. Give her a mic. Sorry, the lights are very bright. One first. Go ahead, shout it out. Sorry, a little bit louder. We talk a lot about free thinking and...
At the same time, thank you so much. So I want to know that we know that the student unions have been banned in Pakistan since 1984, and Sindh uplifted that ban in 2022. I want to ask Mr. Zaidi, what does that implementation look like in Sindh? And I want to ask people who lead universities in Punjab, like Khatija and Dr. Uzma, do you think that universities can reopen that space for student unions so we can actually open student voice in our spaces?
So actually at the IBA we've been having student elections for many years, even when there was a ban on student elections. So there's a student council, they elect themselves, and if they have any party affiliations, they're very free to voice their concerns. But usually, because the IBA is slightly different from Punjab University, for example, they're more concerned about their own issues. So they've been electing them, they sit on various bodies, they advise, they take part in, they advise the deans at the IBA as well. So they're very participatory, and they sit in something called the disciplinary committee as well. So they can listen to cases, which concern other students. So it's very, very open in that way, and they're entitled to their voice.
Thank you. And if somebody can comment about Punjab, do you think that change can come here soon?
I think we have to move on to the next question. This gentleman here.
So free speech is about knowledge, and knowledge is about free speech. And 18-year-olds, when they come into the university, vote in this country, and maybe 16-year-olds in other countries. Of course, they're entitled to their views. Of course, they should support whoever they want, wherever they are. And there is always a discussion about ideas, knowledge, and if we ignore what Mr. Trump is doing, our students are not going to learn anything. So I think that's the whole idea of free speech is part of that.
I don't know what cutting costs of cancer research has to do with upping standards, but I think we can move on to the next question. Anybody here? There's a gentleman here.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question.
So, will the host like to tell me the name of this gentleman sitting here?
I can't hear you. Adil Saab?
Yeah, sorry. Adil Saab, I have a question from you. You mentioned the three universities name a lot repeatedly when you were speaking: MIT, Harvard, Oxford, MIT, Harvard, Oxford. So, my question is that these top tier universities are extremely competitive. A student is competing with the whole world, and if the student is competent, he may not be in the eyes of the admission board. And due to the extremely high numbers of applications, there is a significant probability that a lot of student applications will be overlooked and not assessed on a deeper level. So if the students don't get accepted in these Ivy Leagues, air quotes, they might have options, but they have fear of missing out because they didn't get into that Ivy League university, and they have this FOMO while studying at a subpar university that they think is a subpar university. So, and I would like to add on that, and I think these Ivy Leagues take advantage of the brand image they have developed over the years, and they charge a lot for the education they're offering, and students are indebted for at least minimum 5 years with the student loans they have taken out, and they are hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, and do you think we need to scale universities that are good enough, and a lot of good enough universities should be built so that the students don't feel that they are missing out, and the universities that bad repos should work on their repos. It be providing education, but a student is avoiding that in particular university of their bad repos. So what do you have to say on that?
Please excuse me if I haven't fully understood your question, but what I understand from what you're saying is that obviously there are huge entry barriers. So I'm running this Oxford Pakistan program, and we try and bring in Pakistanis from different backgrounds, university, etc., and regions to Oxford. And every time we discover another barrier, right? So there's a barrier also of the admission fee for many students. Just to pay 30,000 rupees just for the application fee is a huge barrier. Look, success is always ration in the world. And secondly, whenever there's success, it tends to perpetuate itself. There have been studies about different income backgrounds, students coming from those high income backgrounds, more likely to get into these top places, Harvard, Oxford, and their children again get into Oxford and Harvard. So if you go back to Piketty's presentation, it's elite universities are an important mechanism for perpetuating inequality, intergenerational transmission of inequality. Now, What does an elite university do in that context is to be very actively addressing those barriers. So at Oxford, for example, one of the most active areas of discussion, how do you improve access? So this year, for example, the university has started active academic futures program. And it's saying there are two communities in the UK who are extremely underrepresented at Oxford, despite their substantial proportion in the population, the British Bangladeshis, British Pakistanis. And they've started a new scholarship scheme, putting in close to £1 billion in that. So if you are a British Pakistani, you have much more likelihood. Very active program. Then we have a program, the Director of Undergraduate Studies, who's actually from Lahore, Dr. Samina Khan. She travels widely to all these places in the north where you have, schools where people don't apply. With the Oxford Pakistan program, what I'm discovering is that talent is one thing. All people from different parts of Pakistan, for example, would be very talented. But there's a bigger barrier, which is an internal barrier, which is the aspirational barrier. And it's really sad to see so many talented students who just feel that they are not good enough to come. They are not aspiring. They are not hoping. And I think this issue is so deep in Pakistan. People are just totally bereft of hope. It was amazing. Last year, we gave 4 scholarships as part of our program. All 4 of them, in the end, I asked them, did you tell your parents you're applying and you're getting, probably you get into the interview. They said, no, we didn't want to raise expectations. And in the end, all 4 of them said, we never hoped that we will get a scholarship. So I think there is a barrier that the elite university faces, but it interacts with larger socio-economic inequalities, which is addressing people's ability to be persistent. Because, I applied for the Rhodes Scholarship for 3 times. It was the 3rd time that I was successful. I had to persist. In all of these good universities, even as an academic, if I want to publish in a top journal, I get a lot of rejections and I have to repeatedly submit those papers. For that, you need a new dynamic in society which has hope as a key part of that dynamic. And the universities, successful universities, will always be places which ration opportunity. Therefore, they have to be extra vigilant and careful to be engaging with those access programs, which a university like Oxford is doing a great job. It needs to do more. So I think that's the dynamic we are really talking about. But it's certainly in the larger discussion of inequality, elite universities are absolutely a part of that debate.
Thank you, Adil. Thank you, Adil. I completely agree with that. Talent is everywhere, opportunity is not, and we are excited to hear what the Oxford Pakistan program continues doing. We've also mentioned how universities are microcosms of the society that they exist in. And I think that's a really important point, especially as we move forward. We're all practitioners in this space. Nobody has said that there is no place in the world for university education anymore. I feel like we've come somewhere conclusive with this argument, and I see some people raising hands, but unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I'd like to offer the panelists for any concluding remarks before we finish up. Yes, please.
I think there's one aspect of universities that is particularly pertinent to Pakistan that I'd like to put on the table, and that is it's also a social and cultural cauldron. It's the place when anybody and all from all walks of life comes in, and then they get an opportunity. They get an opportunity to shine, to succeed, and it's also a safe space where you are allowed to experiment with thoughts are expressed, where debates are held. And in that way, they perform a very, very critical role, especially in a country like Pakistan. So in IBA, you will be not only getting people from just the elite, you will be getting from all social strata, from different parts of Sindh, and they will have that opportunity to interact with the world. So it plays an absolutely crucial role as far as social mobility and expression of talent is concerned.
Thank you, Dr. Badavi.
Yes, just very quickly. I mean, I get the impression from what I've heard about in Pakistan that a lot of students favour the STEM subjects. And I think that if I were devising a university, I would say that we must not forget what makes us human, and human intelligence and creativity, art for the sake of art. These are the things that make us uniquely human. And I would say that, you know, those people going into STEM, you know, think about a world without music. Think about a world, you know, where you listen to music that's been generated by AI. You know, or novels, great novels written by AI. This is not a world that we would wish to live in. So I would say that I'd love to see a university where maybe in the first year, even if you're doing STEM or whatever, that you have access to a wider array of disciplines, you know, arts and humanities, social sciences, you know, so that you can nurture that critical thinking and that you don't just sort of sit there number crunching. Because I think in the world of AI and technology, we must not forget human intelligence, creativity, and the arts. And, you know, understanding people, spaces, systems requires us to have, you know, a whole array of these topics. So I would give a shout out to, you know, the humanities and the arts, history and so on. You know, without history, you explain the past through history, yes, but you also inform the present and help shape the future. So I would say that for all those countries where the students are just thinking about STEM, let us remember what makes us uniquely human.
Thank you so much, Dr. Badavi. And I'm going to finish in Urdu, so please do excuse me for transitioning into Urdu now. I'm going to sum up. There's an anecdote from Aga Khan University at the very beginning when all of these doctors-to-be enter the classroom. They have about 2 weeks of humanities. तो जब वो जाते हैं अपने क्लासरूम के अंदर, उनको उनके प्रोफेसर ये कहते हैं कि डॉक्टर बनने के लिए तो आपके पास 4 साल हैं, मेरे पास बस 2 हफ्ते हैं आपको बंदा बनाने के लिए. तो I think that sums up the purpose of universities. And we are going to end with that. Thank you so much to everybody who came on this Saturday afternoon. Please continue coming to events like this. They are far and few between in Lahore, so thank you so much for showing up for this. Thank you.